What if your father was murdered while serving in the Navy and no one would tell you why? For decades, it was buried. But the truth doesn't always stay buried forever. Imagine being a little girl and learning that your father, an officer in the U.S. Navy, was murdered, not by an enemy on foreign soil, but by someone on his own ship. And then the killer vanished without a trace. Tonight's guest lived that nightmare. Allicia Johnson Niles was just a child when her father was shot and killed aboard the USS Richard S. Edwards in Pearl Harbor. The case was buried in silence. The U.S. Navy went quiet, and for decades, Allicia carried the weight of trauma, grief, and 1,000 unanswered questions. But she didn't stay silent. Fueled by heartbreak, spiritual connection, and a burning need for truth, Allicia did what no one else dared. She uncovered what really happened aboard that ship. Her book, Angel in Arlington, is more than a memoir. It's a courageous investigation into government secrets, generational pain, and the power of a daughter's love to seek justice. She's here tonight not only to share her story, but to show us what healing looks like when you stop waiting for closure and start creating it yourself. Please welcome author, speaker, and survivor Allicia Johnson Niles.
And Hey, Tiffany, you wrote that. That was beautiful. That all right, that intro was awesome. Like, I'm proud of my little intro, but I know it by heart almost. But wow. Bravo. Very well put. You're an author too, then, I take it.
I'm in the making.
Well, yeah, anyway. Thank you. Thank you for such a beautiful introduction. That's awesome. And thank you for having me.
This really intrigued me because when your father passed, not only were you a child, but you were a newborn, right? Or pretty close to it.
I was 2 years old. I just turned 2. My brother was 8 months old. So it was, yeah. But still no memories at all. Not a single memory of my dad. But yeah, so.
Yes. The government, one thing they're good at is keeping secrets for their own.
They definitely are. I mean, I've got mixed feelings, actually. I've got a very kind of, I don't know if it's unpopular opinion, but I feel like it's realistic in some ways. I mean, I'll just share it right now. It's with my experience in dealing with the government and dealing with the Navy. They're very, 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 very good people. But it's also a very, very flawed system. So, it was just, there was a lot of up and down and emotional, obviously. I mean, I was trying to find out what happened to my dad, and would not give me anything. But then along the way, it was just beautiful to find people who actually wanted to help. Like, they were public servants in every sense of the word. They lived it. They live it. I was not surprised at the cover up. I was not surprised at the stonewalling. But when I came across those few beautiful people, that surprised me and that changed everything.
How old were you when you started trying to tackle this?
It was a slow process. The turning point was when I was 30 years old. Growing up, I struggled with a lot of identity issues, insecurity, eating disorders. My dating life was an absolute train wreck. And all I really ever wanted was to get married and have kids. And, of course, I'm 30 years old. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not meeting anybody? What's going on? I mean, it's not like that's all I focused on, but at the same time, as I was living life, I'm like, I can't hold a relationship together for anything. And I'd have some people tell me, you can't tell anybody about your dad, or you're broken, or there's something wrong with you. I had this narrative that there was something wrong with me. I was talking to this guy, that I went out with this guy, and he had just lost his mom. And he was just like, I was like, well, yeah, my dad died when I was 2 years old, but that's different. Like, I don't have any feelings about him. It's okay. And he's like, are you kidding me? He's like, you have every right to miss your dad. He's like, I have memories of my mom. At least I have that. You have every right to grieve him. And, growing up in grief and trauma, I'm sure as you've talked to other guests, I'm sure, when you deal with grief and trauma as a child, you're a people pleaser. like case classic example right here. And it's not like I needed permission, but I kind of did. Like to have somebody that I wanted to impress, somebody that was just like, of course you have that right. Where my whole life I had created this narrative that was just like, he died before I could remember him. Of course I can't love him. He died, it had been almost 30 years. Of course I can't have those feelings. And here I have this guy telling me, you have every right to that, when I had been feeling those feelings all along. And so with that permission, that social acceptance, for lack of a better term, I'm like, okay, all right. So then the next thing he said was, it's none of my business. Oh, because he asked me, he's like, so what happened to your dad? I'm like, well, he was a narcotics officer in the Navy and he was killed by a crazy guy who pled insanity and got away with it. Does that sound like a 5-year-old? Yes, because that's what I was told when I was 5 years old, and that's what I told everybody. And he's like, and? I'm like, that's all? And he's like, where is he? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, you really need to find out what happened. So, again, somebody that I respected, somebody I looked up to, the first person ever to be like, you know what? Not only did he give me permission to have those feelings, he was also like, get out there and find it. This is important. And like, of course, my mom knew it was important, but she had moved, I don't want to say moved on. She still loves my dad. She is remarried. But, it was just that validation that was like, okay, you know what? Why not? So then I started researching, and yeah, it was a long, wild, it was a roller coaster to say the least, but I felt this divine connection. I felt guided. I turned to the Navy, and of course, they're like, oh, no, sorry, we can't give you any information. It was been a long, very interesting road. So,
I mean, you're looking back for like 30 years of data. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know how long the Navy would keep those kinds of records, if it's like indefinitely or if they purge them, like kind of like medical records, every 7 to 10 years they dump your records. So it's just hard to say how much, yeah, you would be able to find after that long.
that's a really good point. That's really, I appreciate you giving them the benefit of the doubt. I will tell you that I can't remember what year it was, but there was a huge fire in I can't remember the acronym for it, but it's a military record center or something like that. There was a big fire and that got rid of a lot of the records. But when I called them, they're like, nope, we can't give you any information. Nope, sorry. And so, and to be honest, like digging in and trying to find out the information about my dad's killer, um, that happened, that was as I got into the research more. So the beginning was just kind of like reaching out, trying to find people who knew him, asking the basic questions. It was a really long process. I didn't find out all the answers, like the end of like what really happened, which, sorry, can't share that because that's the end of my book, but I didn't find out like what really happened until 4 years ago. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, like all the details, what really happened. Oh, why did Carl Smiley kill my dad? I didn't find all that out until just recently when some new pieces of information came forward. So, but as far as like keeping the records and things like that, they do have them. I got them. But
Oh,
it's
good.
just, yeah,
Good to know.
yeah, I
Yeah.
did get them. It was a fight. It was like a several years fight, but I got them.
Was his murderer still alive?
He was. So growing up, I carried this irrational fear that he knew who we were and something, that he could come after us. But then there's this side of me that was just like, the Boy Scout, whatever, like, oh, well, a murderer in the Navy, of course they're going to put him behind bars. I just wanted to know what happened to him. So, you're asking a little bit earlier when I said it wasn't until like the stonewalling happened later on when I did reach out. I'm just like, where is he? What's going on? Can you give me that information? They're like, nope. Which, to be fair, is somebody else's life. But honestly, like, this was my dad's killer. He murdered my dad. My family had every right to know where this human was and to be safe from him, Like, we didn't know why he killed my dad. Was it drugs? Was it mental illness? We had no idea. That was like the biggest question for so long. Drugs, mental illness, what happened? My mom was told it was homicide. And we actually ended up finding out later that my dad's killer had been at large almost the entire time. So it was,
That's crazy.
yeah, it was wild when I figured that out. It was,
That's the one question, like, everyone always wants to know. Why? Like, what was the motive? And people can't really rest in peace for the most part until they get that, because when you take somebody that you love, you better have a damn good reason for doing that.
yep. I mean, for the people who are watching, you can see my dad over my shoulder. I mean, his picture on my shoulder. He was like, of course, I grew up hearing stories about how wonderful daddy was. And, of course, he's my mom's sweetheart and just he loved you. And oh, everybody loved him. And then I'd hear his sibling side of the story. Well, yeah, he's a little bit pushy older brother. He's the oldest of six. But he grew up East Coast, dancing lessons, like the whole high society, the whole 9 yards, prep school. And so, he was that bossy older brother, but then so many people were just like, oh, everybody loved him. And then I was like, how is he on this ship? One thing I can tell you is the men that I reached out to who were on his ship, they're just like, your dad was not a typical sailor. Now, my dad's several of the people that I've got in contact with, they were very similar. They were like, this was post-Vietnam. One of them, who's a very dear friend, he was on his way to law school at the time when he ended up getting drafted. So, it's not fair for me to say he wasn't your typical salty sailor, but they all told me that. Like, he was a gentleman's gentleman. He was, you know. And so for word to get out, you'd think that somebody like that, like, people would be up in arms, no pun intended. A man like that was taken. It was in Pearl Harbor. It was on his ship. He could have been safe there. It's not like he was out at war or anything like that. He was doing his officer duties when Smiley killed him in front of more than one person. That, it's just, it doesn't make any sense. And then to find out years later, decades later, that, oh yeah, by the way, he's at large. What can you tell me about him? Nothing. So it's just, it doesn't make sense, statute of limitations, things like that. I believe that families have an absolute right to know. I also, to go back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, where it's like, you know what, there's some things that I have to respect about the military, even though I don't like it. I mean, in certain situations, you do keep quiet for a while. Like, if it's going to cause potential for anybody else to be killed, if it's going to cause national security or anything like that, when you sign your name on that line, you're defending the country. So if it's going to cause any other problems, then yes, you can keep it quiet. But good grief, it was almost 30 years and no national security was compromised. It was either he was mentally ill or on drugs. He murdered my dad and he was at large. What happened? Who dropped the ball,
Right. And you would think maybe like the people who really did respect him when they got out, they might say something. But I mean, who's to say they didn't? And then that was covered up. You just never know how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'm part of this organization called TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And they're the most amazing, life-changing organization. Have you heard of them, Tiffany?
I have.
Okay. So are
And I
you?
saw that you're a member of it.
I am. Are you? If you don't mind
I
me
am
asking.
not, because I
Oh,
don't
okay.
know if you had to like be someone special.
A survivor, yeah, a military survivor. Have you had a loved one who?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, you can volunteer. They definitely love volunteers. They love donations too. No, just kidding. You could edit that part out. So I'm not telling you to donate. I promise. No, they are life changing. Being part of the organization absolutely changed my life. Having complex PTSD. They like to say complex post traumatic stress because they don't call it a disorder. I call it a disorder because it's something that is just anyway. It's pretty deep. But there was nothing more validating than going to my first TAPS event when I was, oh, good grief. He had been gone for 40 years. So I was 42. But it was really cool because I walked in ready to, well, first of all, I was embarrassed to be there. That's one thing about my story, my grief, my experience is like, like I said, I don't have the right to miss him. I don't have the right to grieve. It's been too long. I'm broken. There's something weird about me. And so here I go to their National Military Survivor Seminar in Washington, D.C., which, of course, my book called Angel in Arlington. My dad's buried there. Slightly proud of it. But it was an opportunity to go back and visit his grave and also to just help other people, to be a voice for the kids. That was my intention. And I showed up and they're like, yeah, we knew you were coming. And I'm sitting here thinking all these people, seeing all these little kids and all these people who had just lost their loved ones. And I'm like, don't give me any of the free stuff. Don't, I'm here to serve. And they're like, honey, you're here to heal. And I'm like, no. And they're like, you'd be surprised at how quickly you will find somebody that you can relate to. I'm like, sure. I'm the weird one, whatever. So I literally turn around and go on and pick up my bag and my little lanyard, because the convention things that they have going on. And this girl was standing there. She had her little stickers, how they have your name and they put the stickers on the badges. I'm talking about how they kind of have, yeah. And she had adult child in Navy. I'm like, oh, me too. And she's like, mine's different. My dad died when I was really young and I don't hardly remember him. I'm like, this is literally like, yeah. So just gotten there. So that was really cool, life-changing experience and more validation than I could ever have imagined. And then fast forward to, how long has it been? Like 3, I think maybe after I got married, it was 2 or 3 years ago. Anyway, I didn't get married till I was 46. And speaking of complex PTSD, those anxieties came roaring back, like worse than ever. And I couldn't understand why. I'm like, I finally found somebody who loves me and treats me well. What is wrong with me? Why am I this kind of head case, just paranoid about everything? And so I went back and we went to TAPS and Bob Delaney. Have you heard of him? He's
That sounds really familiar.
he's amazing. He was an NBA ref for a really, really long time. But before that, he was an undercover cop in New Jersey and he worked with the mafia. So he's an expert in post-traumatic stress. And anyway, I talked to him. Long story short, it cut my anxiety in half both times. So having that validation, having people who understand you, community is, I would say, as far as importance, as far as like healing and things like that, having community is right up there. I would say, validation, community, and therapy are the 3 things that are life-changing. Good therapy. You have to have a good therapist because there's some that are not. So anyway.
Yeah, that's what I tell my listeners all the time is, listen, you don't have to like the first one you get. You don't have to like the second, third, or fourth, but don't give up because you're going to find somebody who's going to work for you. Don't give up on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And believe in miracles. Believe you can be led to that person because I believe that, higher power God, I believe in God. And it's like I felt directed to the right therapist who made all the difference. So.
Well, I am happy that you now validated yourself. It's a shame that you harbored all those feelings for so long because I'm sure it did. It probably put you on a destructive path with your relationships and it manifests in so many different ways and we don't even know it until so much later.
Yeah, it's true. The wonderful thing is my mom, my family, I had such an incredible support system. And I've definitely got some pretty strong soapboxes when it comes to, everybody grieves differently. Everybody raises their children differently, things like that. So once I allowed myself to grieve and once I started to experience just the absolute freedom of being able to cry when I felt like I wanted to. Of course, I wanted it for others, but I was raised in a religious household. My mom would always talk about how we're going to see daddy again. We have this picture up and other pictures up. And so the thing that taught me was that he's really there. So here I'm saying, oh, poor me, I didn't have a connection. Well, in my little 2, 3, 4-year-old brain, it's just like, okay, there's a wonderful person. It made it easy for me to connect with God and to be able to feel more of I have a father in heaven who loves me. And so, I'm not saying he was the same person, but it made it for the little 3-year-old to be able to kind of feel that connection more, like just kind of having, somebody up there who loves me. And so I kind of had the same warmth, I guess, towards an idea of a heavenly father and a God. So that might be kind of weird. But anyway, you can cut that out. I'm like, that's a little deep. So, but my mom taught me how to be, that my dad was there. But in my own brain, like, my anxiety was very, very real. Like, anytime anybody would leave, like, anytime my mom would leave, I'd hold my breath until she made it back home. And still to this day, my mind will immediately jump to worst case scenario. And growing up, I was embarrassed about it. I thought that was weird. I'm like, why can't I relax and enjoy this stuff? What's going on? I was constantly comparing myself. My mom comes from a really big family. I have a bunch of cousins my age, a bunch of girl cousins my age. We're really, really close friends. I compared myself to them. And I found out later that, when you're a toddler, everything is all about you. And so as I look back, it's like I almost assigned myself as a second class person. I was so amazing. My daddy was taken because I wasn't good enough for him. And I was about 31. And I'm not saying that's absolutely the truth, but from what I know about psychology and things like that and, early childhood development, it makes total sense. And so, because I always saw myself as a second class person, and I was always that's where the people pleasing came in. I was always trying to prove myself and my worth. So,
Do you find, like, truth in, like, that cliche or whatever, like, daddy issues? Do you actually think, like, there's something to that? Not having a dad kinda makes you act and do things differently than maybe you would if you did?
yes and no. Well, actually, that's a really good question. I've never had it put that way. I was always told I had daddy issues, and so I haven't really liked that term. It's interesting because that kind of brought that up. I'm like, but
And I didn't mean it that way,
oh no, no, no,
you
no,
said
not at
it, and I
all.
was like, "Oh,
Oh no,
she doesn't take that wrong."
no,
But
it's no. I don't. I have no filter. So you're fine. You're totally good. I was not offended at all. It was when people would bring that up to me when it came to dating, I'd just be like wanting to give them the middle finger or go and cry or both. But daddy issues, I guess maybe a way to rephrase it is, and I'm not saying you phrased it wrong. We can totally use daddy issues. We can call it what it is. But do I believe that children who grew up without a dad have different experiences and have to fight a little bit more for confidence? Depends on who the dad is. You can have an abusive dad, we could go really deep here, but yeah, I do. I think, in a little bit of the research that I did, I actually, like when I was 30, I actually went back to college too and got my bachelor's degree. And while I was doing that, I went into communication. So I was doing all sorts of basically self-therapy, come to find out through my classes. But I did some digging into, okay, why am I not dating? What is wrong with me? And is it because my dad died? And what I found out was children of bereaved children, so children who have lost a parent, um, they do better than children of divorce. And the
oh,
reason is like, especially when you're so young when it happens, half of your identity is your other parent for a very long time. And so children of divorce kind of see the flaws. They kind of see, especially one thing that really, really hit me, and I don't want to make anybody feel guilty by saying this or anything like that, but it doesn't matter if daddy absolutely sucks. If daddy was a nightmare. Telling a little kid, you got to be careful with what you say. It's like you cut daddy down in front of the little kid, they're going to internalize it for a while, especially if they're really young. And so, children who have gone through divorce, they see the flaws in their parent. They also see, especially if mom and dad are cutting each other down, they have to fight that much more for confidence. Where with me, it's like Superman with my dad, and half of who I was, and my mom was wonderful. Um, I must be the one who's inherently broken. If there's something wrong with me, it's all me. It's not because of how I'm made. Does that make sense?
yeah, that makes
So
total sense.
yeah. So as far as like the daddy issues, and from what I've learned, there are some differences. With the thing that was the worst for me, because as we've gone over, I had PTSD for a long time, eating disorders, dating was a train wreck, insecure, second-class person, still fighting the, what's the word? Apocalyptic thinking, worst case scenario. What that came from, in my opinion, is unresolved grief. And you had this little grieving kid, so my mom got married. She married my stepdad when I was 6, and he's wonderful. And they had 5 more boys. So I was the only girl, so I felt
Oh,
even more like the weird one. And I also turned to food for comfort. So we're talking chubby girl tease, oh, let me play my violin. But all the things, like the people pleasing, the whole, the teasing, bullying. You get me starting talking about bullying. Yeah, yeah. Kids could be awful. But um in a nutshell, what I was dealing with was this anxiety that I couldn't understand. Nobody knew what I was going through because, oh, yeah, she's so lucky her dad died before she could remember him. Oh, she was spared that. And even my mom thought that. So my mom gets married when I'm 6. And what do you do when you have a new dad in the home? Picture goes down. That's one thing I will tell any parent. Like, make room for the new parent. Do not scrub it of the old one. Take your child aside and let them know, daddy's still important. We still love him, and let him know. I mean, maybe have a place where you put the picture, but let them know that they have the right to talk about him. Because after my mom got remarried, my dad's picture was down. Half of who I was gone. My daddy doesn't matter. I don't matter. And these are things that hindsight is 2020. I can see that happening now. In the moment, I just felt it. And so I stopped talking about him because he wasn't allowed in our life. And it wasn't until I was 11 years old, and I was a chubby little 11-year-old, and from my overeating. And stepdad and my brothers, they'd gone somewhere, and I started talking to my mom, and the subject of my dad came up. And some really cool things happened. It actually opened the door to my spiritual connection with my dad. And, so there are a few pivotal moments along the way. But really long story short, what I was dealing with was grief that nobody knew about. My brother, very, very handsome guy, um, people pleaser. He had his insecurities. He had things that unresolved grief that nobody knew about. And he actually had his connection later on. Like, I think he was about 40 at the time when that happened. But again, my whole point is just like, you're dealing with grieving kids, and now that I have worked with TAPS, I've worked with other kids, I've become an advocate for children, grieving children. I see many versions of me all over the place. And they're longing for that connection. They feel embarrassed about their feelings. They feel embarrassed about, like, well, how can I love somebody I don't remember? Why isn't this going away? One of my best friends, her husband was killed 28 days before her only son was born. And we were at TAPS, and I remember we were kind of walking past, like, there's a picture of him on my website, actually. But she looked behind him, and he was just kind of like, he was done. I think he was about 7 or 8 at the time. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she's like, well, he's either tired, he's being a brat, or he's sad. And she walked over, and I stayed back, and then I saw these really sweet moments, and I happened to take pictures when she's glad. And, I would have deleted him if she didn't like him. But he just fell into her shoulder, and he's like, why can't I have my dad? And just started sobbing, and then we talked later on, and I'm like, do you feel this way? Yeah. Do you feel this way sometimes? Yeah. Do you wonder this? And he's, yeah. Yeah. And so my whole point is this, like, grief in little kids is so real, especially, and I dare say, I haven't experienced this, but, like, loss of a young child, the loss, like, stillborn, miscarriage, things like that. Like, there's still that powerful level of love that's there that is, like, I would almost say is part of your DNA that's still there. And yet you don't have any memories. You don't have any, well, this is sounding heavy, but, but it's like just being validated and allowed to know that that love is real, and you're going to feel it, and you're going to cry later, and it's okay. So,
Gotta let it out. You have to.
Mhm. And
Gotta go through the
experience it.
process.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and even, like, one thing that Bob Delaney told me, he's like, "This anxiety is gonna pop up," He's like, "My anxiety still pops up, and you just gotta know that it's a trigger, and it's okay, and you're normal." And one of the biggest things, like, when I finally cried over my dad's death, that was the biggest relief of my life. Like, that's a strong statement, but the first time I cried over my dad's death, because I was always afraid of what would it feel like if I was grieving? What would it feel like if I had that loss? I mean, am I still terrified of loss? Absolutely. Like, there is a reason therapy is a good thing. But, like, I was afraid of feeling those feelings, and then when I finally did, it was beautiful. And it was just like, "Oh my gosh, he's real." And trying to think of the way I'm trying to put it, but just like, I'd been running from grief my whole life when I'd been grieving my whole life. So and actually
I'm sure
allowing
you
it was
felt
beautiful.
so much lighter. It's a heavy thing to carry for so long.
Yeah. It was a beautiful experience to be able to feel and just I have the right to love him. I have the right to miss him, and the feeling is real. So,
Of course you do. That was your dad.
yeah. I didn't know him, but I knew him, and then there's also the
Right.
spiritual
I was
intelligence.
curious, like, did he ever do any time or anything, or is that, like, on the book and you're just keeping
Yeah.
that hush?
It wasn't
Okay,
as
gotcha.
long. It wasn't he was at large for a very, 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 very long time. So, it was kinda I found that out while I was writing the book, actually. So, my co-author interviewed him. We tracked him down, my co-author interviewed my dad's killer, so, yeah. Something to look forward to.
Oh, that's
So
interesting. Absolutely. If anybody wants to get the book, is it no? I remember
no.
on your website, I think it said it was okay.
We're we're going traditional. We want to go traditional. My co-author is the New York Times and international bestseller. Um, it's good. It is a good book and a unique story. I mean, we're talking true crime, military, empowerment, all the things combined into one, government cover-up. It's a good book. I don't know when it will be out. I'm hoping within a year or 2. But with my website and everything like that, I mean, I've got 2 websites. There's unlikelycourage.com, which it deals with more of you face your demons when you've gone through trauma and you allow yourself to face them, then you experience this unlikely courage. Because I was this terrified little girl, and all of a sudden I faced the Navy and my dad's killer. Like, I had this courage I didn't know was even possible. So unlikelycourage.com, and then there's also angelinarlington.com, where you can get a free chapter of the book. Is it a teaser? Yes, it absolutely is a teaser, but, I mean, it's not like I mean, yeah. It's good. It's got some twists and turns that, I mean, any true crime enthusiast is gonna be like, "What?" So, I don't know when it's gonna be
I
out,
love
hopefully
it.
soon. So, anyway,
Cool.
yeah, I look back at that and I'm like, "Is this really my life? Is this really happening?" Like, I'll never forget how it was when my co-author was interviewing my dad's killer, and I'm just like, "Her husband's gonna be me." Yeah, a little bit of an instability there, but she's alive. She's doing great. So,
That's crazy. Yeah, I was surprised he sat down for it, but I mean, I guess what you gonna do? It's been so long.
so we did get his side of the story. It is in the book. And even after that, I did not feel completely resolved. But
You were talking about like the spirituality.
the spiritual aspects and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, that's another part of
Yeah.
the book is the spiritual aspect. So, one thing that I'd love to share is like, okay, so talking to my mom, back to that conversation when I was talking to my mom, and I told her about this dream that I had when I was 4 years old. So my mom is like amazing. She bakes bread. She's a seamstress. I swear, she's a gardener. All these things that I am not. But like, she made a bunch of clothes for me when I was little. And there was this purple and green dress that I loved. And I remembered she was giving my clothes away left and right as she had boy after boy after boy. And I'm like, those are mine. And she's like, you don't fit in them anymore. Um, so when I'm 11, I'm sitting there talking to her, and I had this dream where my mom and dad and my brother and I were walking home from church. And it was the church that my grandparents went to after my dad died. And because we lived with my grandparents at the time. And but of course we're a little bit older and we're walking home from church. And I was wearing that purple and green dress and they were singing this hymn. It was just a bloodline to the hymn. That was it. I think I was about 5 when I had the dream or whatever. And maybe a little bit older. So I told my mom about the dream and her eyes got wide and she's like, well, you know the significance to that hymn, don't you? And I'm like, no. Old people sing it? I don't know. And she's like, it was your dad's favorite hymn in the world and it was sung at his funeral. And so then she proceeds to get this box down from the closet. And I knew I'd seen the box before. It had like my dad's dog tags and it had my christening dress and it had the last birthday present. See this little, I'll show you, this little red, white, and blue dress that it was the last birthday present he
Aw.
gave me. This is actually a picture taken on the twin sister ship of my dad's ship that I did a photo shoot on. So I went from fat kid to getting scouted to model, but I still thought I was ugly. Anyway, so got a lot of self-confidence. Beat ourselves
The
up,
shit we
right?
do to ourselves is
Yes,
crazy.
exactly. Exactly. But yeah. So there's that dress and then the purple and green dress, which he did not know why she kept. Then anytime I'd hear that song at church or whatever, I'm like, I'd feel something. But I allowed myself. I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. Maybe my dad's connecting with me a little bit. And then I went to Washington, D.C. when I was 17 years old. One of my best friends lived out there. So we'd go see my dad's grave until my mom got remarried because, he ended up being a stay-at-home mom, lots of kids, no plane tickets for D.C. to go see a grave, And so I went back when I was 17, and my uncle, my dad's brother, lived out there. And I was so nervous to see his grave because I'm like, I'm going to sit here stone-faced as my uncle's like having his heart ripped out again. And when I saw his name in stone, that's where I lost it. I lost it. I didn't go crazy, but that's where I felt that beautiful grief. Well, fast forward to a week or so later, I was still hanging out with my friend. I was back there for a few weeks, and it was Father's Day. And so we're making cookies for her dad. I didn't even think anything. And we go to church, and I think it was, I can't remember which hymn it was, but it was one of the hymns we sang. It was my dad's funeral hymn. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so dumb. I'm like, can we please go to Arlington? And because my grandpa's buried there too. So I was able to go visit my dad's grave. And so that hymn has popped up. And I also had some other experiences on that trip where it's like, I'd have these thoughts and I felt this connection to my dad, but I didn't want to believe it. I'm like, no, that's not real. It's totally not real. But really long story short, it didn't quiet down. Like I'd have these thoughts out of the blue. It's for those who are religious or whatever, connect to the universe or believe the Holy Spirit talks to them or they have these warm feelings or whatever. It was different. It wasn't like anything I had experienced before, on a spiritual level. It was more like a very clear thought. And I'd tell my mom, and she's like, your dad would have said the exact same thing. So in this chapter on my website, it talks about, it just got to the point where I'm like, Daddy, what do you want? And I stopped fighting it. And anytime I'd have these thoughts, it did lead me to something that I needed to do. And so do I believe that I had his help along the way? Absolutely. Do I believe he's still there? Yeah. Not as much as he used to be, but it was, man, I can't get through a podcast without crying.
That's okay.
I mean,
You felt connected, and that was something you had longed for ever since you were a child. So everybody wants to be loved and connect with their parents.
and it's just
You were
cool.
able to do that from the soul.
Yeah. And the cool thing is like I said, the thoughts that I had, nobody could nobody could know these things. Well, yeah, in that chapter again, it goes into like, whoa, nobody knew about who Weghorst was. Because the chapter's about a guy named Weghorst. But it's just cool because I don't just It's kind of hard to explain, but I feel like I know what he's like. You know, it's hard because I don't have those memories. I don't have him to build a relationship, but at the same time, like, I still feel like I know him so deeply, whether it be just like our souls are connected or the DNA. I mean, there could be a lot of different explanations, but that's one thing is like, as much as grieving sucks, there is that beauty in connection, which whether you, like you feel they're in your heart or they think that they're standing there talking or, right there with you. One thing that I've heard that I love is the times that you hurt the most are when they're standing right there. And I love it. I want to say no, but I firmly believe that I would not have solved my dad's murder without his help. I feel like he was involved. He had obviously personal investment in it. There were people that he cared about who, since we got the answers, have healed. And I'm not saying their life was in shambles before, but there was still, just like with me, there was that heavy, there was that question mark, there was that anxiety that once we knew and once we had our answers, there was so much peace. And I'm still very, very close to my dad's friends and the people that I was able to get to know. And on top of that, people that I'm getting to know through chats and also people who are writing their books or people who I've connected with over the years in my advocacy. And I'm not patting myself on the back or anything like that, but like I've had people say, because you had the courage to share your story, I can too. Because you had the courage to do that, I'm going to give this a thought. And I believe that God, the universe, our loved ones, they want the best for us and they want us to be happy. So
I believe that too. And sometimes our pain turns into purpose. So,
a lot of times, I agree. You know that personally.
I'm just so happy how far you've come and how close you feel. It just sucks. It took so long. At least you have it and you're at peace. And that's what's so important.
Yeah. It's very attainable. And I think the biggest thing is just taking that validation and that permission. And, if you think they're talking to you, believe it. They probably are. Don't go, no, check yourself. Don't know that don't go off the deep end. If you're going to go track down a killer, make sure that you've got resources and that you're not knocking on his door by yourself or whatever. I don't know. You get what I'm saying? It's just like, that's one
Right.
thing is spirituality can turn into a slippery slope, so you got to check yourself. So
Right. Spirits, good spirits, are never going to tell you to do bad things.
exactly,
So,
exactly. Yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah. It was an incredible experience. I mean, it was the hardest experience I've ever done, but it was cool because I don't feel him around as much anymore. But every now and then I'll get this little nudge or what are you thinking or what are you doing? Like, it's just kind of what a dad would say every now and then. But while I was doing my research and until I got that done, he was on it. So it was cool. Well, and another thing that's really cool I want to share is it's not just me. So my brother started having we actually have my dad's funeral recorded. And I'm sure my brother won't care that I share this, but he didn't connect. He's like, this is Alicia's thing. Alicia's the one who can miss daddy. That's great. I've got my kids. I've got my life, whatever. And then he reached out to me once. He's like, what's it like when dad talks to you? And I started laughing. I'm like, I don't have to tell you, do I? And he's like, well, so he had this experience where he's riding home from work. He lives in a big city and he's riding home from work and he had his iPad. So that's how long ago it was. And all of a sudden it just started spinning. And then it stopped one of the talks from my dad's funeral. And then he listened to it. It's like, okay, that was different. Same thing. Second or third time, it started spinning and kept going back. And then he started to, I mean, it was a rough time in his life. And he was all like, okay, Allicia, like, if you think he's going to shut up, he's not. So, just embrace it. But It was
Answer the
pretty,
man.
yeah, seriously. And he's had that connection ever since. And then my cousin is 23 years old. This was just barely, and she went to visit his grave. So I've had people who will, like, he's buried in this remote section 1 in Arlington. So nobody goes up there because it's old. It's like the old monuments and stuff like that. And she texted me and she's just like, I felt your dad there. Like, it was just really cool because I've had different people be like, you know what? I felt he was there and I feel like he loves your family, or just different things like that. And so I don't know. I think it's cool to, whether people believe or not, it's nice for me to believe that they're with us. And yes, they're busy and they've got things going on, but we still have that support on the other side, which to me is a lot of empowerment and brings a lot of peace. So,
I agree. I like to believe that, they don't really die, so to say. Just your vessel dies, but the soul does not.
yeah.
They're living another life now, as Lord knows as what.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not in any hurry to see him, but it's cool to think about reuniting at some point, and just, I don't know. It's something I think is beautiful. It adds off the grief, not in a way of, oh, wishful thinking, oh, sure, cute, whatever. But it's more like, this is real. Like, death sucks. Grief absolutely sucks. I hate it. But it does take that edge off a little bit. So,
Yes. I am the worst at saying goodbye to people. I can't. It's
see you
it's not
later.
pretty.
See you later. Talk to you soon. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, I always give my advice, like, make sure I already gave my advice for parents. Is like, make sure that the kid has access to a picture and that they know that they can talk about them. If they want to, go to unlikelycourage.com. That's the website I'm still building up a little bit. I'm on Instagram. I love to connect with people. I do speaking, things like that. I mean, you can find that information on my website. But, like, the biggest thing is, I just want your listeners to have validation. And if they have any questions, I mean, I'm here. That sounds cheesy, but just know that they're not alone and that life really is more beautiful when you face the things that you're most afraid of, like, the grief and things like that. So, and just
Yes, you
validate
have
the grief.
to. You have to. Yeah, get comfortable with being uncomfortable because that's when all the magic happens.
Yeah, I love it. I love that statement. That's beautiful. So,
Yeah, and anyone listening, if you know somebody who needs to listen to this episode or maybe has questions about someone that on their side, reach out. Maybe she can help you or work with you.
yeah. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a coach, but I've got resources, and I definitely want to give that validation. So, unlikelycourage.com or angelinarlington.com is the where you can find me. So,
All right, perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here, Allicia. This is great.
oh, thank you, Tiffany. It was
Good
really
stuff.
still fun talking to you. I appreciate you so much.
If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to follow, rate, and review. It helps more survivors find our community. Do you want to be part of the conversation and share your story? Visit truecrimeconnections.com. Until next time, be safe, be seen, and never forget your story has power.